to the ranking member for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the outset, I just want to note that this is the first Immigration Subcommittee meeting without Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee. She was not only a long-term member of this subcommittee, but she served as its ranking member from the 105th through the 109th Congress. And when it came to advocating for those in need, there was simply no better champion than Representative Jackson-Lee. Back in 2020, I remember when reports emerged of women being subjected to forced medical procedures in immigration detention that left some women unable to bear children. My office found a survivor who was Representative Jackson-Lee's constituent who was about to be deported, and I reached out to the representative who jumped right on it. Not only did she stop her deportation once, she actually stopped it twice. She was a relentless advocate, and her voice on this subcommittee will be missed. On today's hearing, I want to start by commending Secretary Becerra for coming before the subcommittee today. Our staff went back and looked, and we believe that this might be the first time that the Health and Human Services Secretary has ever come before the Immigration Subcommittee. It shows once again how accommodating the Biden administration has been when it comes to oversight. Unfortunately, this is just another show hearing by the majority. With just 6 weeks left in the 118th Congress, this is only the second immigration-related hearing in the Judiciary Committee to which our colleagues in the majority have actually invited a government witness. Today's hearing will be one final attempt by the majority to use all their same false talking points, that the Biden administration purposefully created a border crisis and lost, in quotes, lost tens of thousands of children, all of which we know is wrong by the facts. And I'm sure the Secretary will address this as well. But let's just be clear, these children are not lost. HHS's legal authority ceases once an unaccompanied child is united with a sponsor, usually a parent or a close relative. While HHS conducts 3 follow-up calls to ensure that everything is going well between a sponsor and a child, the agency has no ability to force their way into the home. If no one answers these 3 calls, then HHS is no longer in contact with the child. Now, that does not mean that the child is, quote, lost. And further, this is not a new policy. Previous administrations have dealt with similar reports of missing children who have been released from HHS custody. For example, in 2018, there was a widespread report that the Trump administration, quote, lost contact with approximately 1,500 unaccompanied children during just a 3-month period. Those children were also not lost. They were following the same procedures that this administration has followed. Soon, Republicans will not have anyone to blame. In a few short weeks, they will have full control of the government. Republicans will actually have to govern and take responsibility for what happens in the country. Unfortunately, this majority has shown again and again that they're not serious about finding solutions to our complex immigration system. While we will hear Republicans ranting today about children being trafficked into the country, the only legislation that this majority has passed on this issue would actually gut protections for unaccompanied children. That cruel, inhumane, and unworkable bill, H.R. 2, would allow unaccompanied children to languish in Border Patrol facilities for up to a month. It would force children to appear within 2 weeks before an immigration judge with no access to an attorney. And it would send children back to their home countries where they are at high risk for exploitation and abuse. Their bill, by the way, would also decimate the bipartisan Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, or TVPRA, which Congress passed on a sweeping bipartisan basis and established the U.S. government's central framework for keeping unaccompanied children out of the hands of traffickers. Democrats want to protect children and not make it more difficult for them to stay safe. And we have more work to do, real serious work to do to make that happen. I was devastated last year reading articles about young children who were taken advantage of by unscrupulous sponsors and employers, and the potential warning signs that were missed. This increase in child labor is a trend that has been steadily on the rise, especially since 2018. It's completely unacceptable, and I've been shocked to see Republican state legislatures respond by passing bills that actually weaken the protections on child labor. In response, HHS finalized regulations aimed at protecting unaccompanied children that are placed in HHS's care. The rule improves HHS's placement and release processes for unaccompanied children. It strengthens kids' privacy and legal rights, and it sets minimum standards for emergency and influx facilities designed to hold children when there is insufficient space in permanent facilities. The Departments of Labor and Health and Human Services have also put in place a variety of new efforts to combat exploitative child labor, including a new interagency task force to improve coordination and information sharing amongst agencies. At the same time, we know that the Office of Refugee Resettlement and the administration overall need to do more to ensure the safety of kids. And to do that, we in Congress have to provide sufficient funding to these agencies for that critical work. That includes funding to increase post-release services for children after they're placed with a sponsor, as well as appointment of counsel for all unaccompanied children to ensure that they understand the extremely complex immigration system. Improvements in both of these areas would help protect children from mistreatment, exploitation, and trafficking. And that funding, unfortunately, is something that the Republican majority has been unwilling to do. The Department of Labor also does need to be more aggressive in going after unscrupulous employers to the fullest extent of the law. Many of these employers were using E-Verify, which just goes to show how ineffective that system is. And they should be held accountable for hiring kids and subjecting them and all other workers to harsh conditions. I look forward to hearing from the Secretary today. The protection of children from exploitation, abuse, and trafficking should be a bipartisan issue, and I hope my colleagues approach it in that way. I thank you for your service, Mr. Secretary, and I yield back.